Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I will make you clear what is brainstem. So today's topic is brainstem. It is a part of brain and it's very important part as because most of the cranial nerves are associated with the brainstem. Now look at the picture. This is the anterior view and this is the lateral view. First come to the anterior view. This is two part of the cerebrum. Okay, this is called the telencephalon. Telencephalon is actually consists of cerebrum. Cerebrum. The 90% of the brain is comprises with the cerebrum. This is telencephalon. Next, there is a diencephalon. Di means two. Here is two thalamus. Thalamus, and also at the below of the thalamus there is a hypothalamus. Hypothalamus. Okay, so telencephalon, this is cerebrum. Cerebrum, diencephalon, this two blue part is the thalamus and hypothalamus is located below the thalamus. And then there is a mesencephalon. Mesencephalon is the mid brain. Mesencephalon is called the midbrain. And next there is a metencephalon. Metencephalon is composed of pons and cerebellum. Metencephalon is composed of pons and cerebellum. Here this is pons. Okay, and this is cerebellum. And at last there is a myelencephalon. Myelencephalon is the myelin means medulla. It's called medulla oblongata. It's called medulla oblongata. So this is the basic structure of our brain. Telencephalon, diencephalon, thalamus. Below the thalamus there is a hypothalamus. I am showing you the position of hypothalamus in this lateral view. And next there is a mesencephalon, that is midbrain. Behind the midbrain there is a cerebellum. Cerebellum and pons, these together form the metencephalon. And next after the metencephalon there is a myelencephalon. It's the medulla oblongata. Now compare with the lateral view. Here this is the telencephalon. Okay, the outermost part is cortex, that is cerebrocortex. Then there is the massive portion is cerebrum. Next the cerebrum, there is a thalamus. This blue part is thalamus. Just compare with this image. This is the thalamus, and below the thalamus here is a protrusion, that is hypothalamus. This is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is actually composed of pituitary gland, is a master gland. It's actually master activator. Okay. Now, after the thalamus and hypothalamus, there is a midbrain. This is the midbrain. This part is midbrain, and after the midbrain, this is pons. This is pons. This is cerebellum, and this is medulla oblongata. Okay. Now the question is that what is brainstem? Brainstem is composed of pons, midbrain and medulla oblongata. Okay. These three part together form the brainstem. This part. This is a stem-like structure. This is called the brainstem. Okay. This brainstem is very important because from the brainstem most of the cranial nerves. We know that we have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Out of 12, 10 cranial nerves are associated with the brainstem. So it is very important. It is a pathway, it's a gateway of nerves that are transfer the signals to the brain and also convey the signal from the brain to the other part of the body. So brainstem is very important part. So the pons, midbrain and medulla oblongata together form the brainstem. Now come to its function. This is our brainstem. This is thalamus, midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata. These three form the brain stem. Before coming into the functions of the midbrain, pons and medulla, that is brainstem, you must know what are the cranial nerves are associated with the brainstem. Okay, so first there is the optic nerve. This arrow that is entering to the brainstem, this means the sensory impulse, okay, and the arrow outwards from the brainstem, that is the motor nerve. So this is the sensory sensory nerve, that is optic nerve, that is number 2. We have 12 pairs. This is the second nerve, and the first nerve, that is the olfactory nerve, that actually associated with the upper part of the brain, with the cerebrum. But here from the optic nerve, from the second nerve, it is associated with the brainstem. So I am here writing it from the second nerve. Okay, that is the optic nerve is the first nerve with associated with the brainstem. Next, oculomotor. Oculomotor, that is the third one. Next, trochlear. This is the fourth. So second, third, fourth is associated with the midbrain. Actually third and fourth associated with the midbrain, and it's coming through the thalamus. Next, trigeminal. Here both sides arrow, that means is a its functions as a sensory as well as the motor neuron, is a mixed nerve. Okay, so that's why I am expressing that motor nerve by that arrow on the both of the sides of the line. So it's a trigeminal. Next, at the junction of the pons and medulla, at the junction there are 3 nerves. It's a sensory abducens. It is number 6. It is a motor nerve. Then there is a sensory nerve facial, and the next, that is vestibulocochlear. Vestibulocochlear, that is number 8. Okay, and then from the medulla associated with glossopharyngeal, that is number 9. Vagus, number 10, and hypoglossal, that is number 12. Okay, so these are the cranial nerves associated with the brainstem. Here 2 cranial nerves are missing. Number one, that is the olfactory nerve, which is associated with the upper part of the brain, and the 11th, that is the spinal accessory nerve. The spinal accessory nerve is actually associated with the spinal nerve, that is from the present at the middle center of the medulla oblongata, and it goes to the spinal cord. So that nerve is also not here, is not present here. So these are the cranial nerves associated with the brainstem. Okay, now come to the functions. Okay, so first there is a midbrain. Okay, so midbrain, what happened here? Midbrain is very important, plays a very important role for the in reflex associated with the vision. Midbrain plays very important role that is associated with the vision. Okay, so first midbrain, vision. Second, accommodation reflex. Accommodation reflex is that when we find some object in front of us, we can measure the distance. That is the accommodation. That object we see, we can measure the distance, how the object is. That is the accommodation. Next, pupillary light reflex. Pupillary light reflex. Pupillary light reflex. Pupillary light reflex is that whenever a much more amount of light come on our eye, our pupil contract. Okay, and whenever this is a dim light, the pupil dilates. So here, if much more light is coming on our eye, then our pupil constricted. So that is the pupillary light reflex. And the fourth one is substantia nigra. Substantia nigra. What is that? Substantia nigra is a black substance. This black substance is due to the presence of melanin. Okay, and that melanin, actually this pigment melanin secretes dopamine neurotransmitter. So substantia nigra is associated with a part of dopaminergic system. This system is important for movement and behavior. Okay, this dopaminergic reflex system is actually goes to the basal ganglia, and which is actually initiate the smooth movement, motor movement, initiate motor movement, and continue with the smooth activity, motor activity. Suppose for anybody, if his dopaminergic neuron is die, then their smooth muscle activity, they are actually not able to initiate the smooth muscle activity. Okay, that disease is called the Parkinson's disease. They not initiate the motor activity. Okay, so these are the main functions of the midbrain. These are all associated with the vision. Okay, so here the optic nerve receives the signal, the sensory information coming through the optic nerve, and it goes through the oculomotor. So this is the sensory neuron taking the information inside the brainstem, and the oculomotor, from the oculomotor the information goes out by, it is a motor neuron. So optic come, oculomotor out, sensory, motor. So this is the function, and also by the trochlear. Okay, now come to the pons. Okay, here the first function is the midbrain. Now pons. Pons is a jaw jerk reflex. Jaw, first function, jaw jerk reflex. What is that reflex? When we open our mouth, it gives a sensory impulse. Okay, it gives a sensory impulse. And then what happened? A motor impulse. When we open our mouth, the sensory impulse come through the trigeminal nerve to the pons. Sensory impulse come to the pons by the trigeminal nerve, and then motor impulse also come through this trigeminal, and it what the motor impulse is coming, that you have to close your jaw. So then our jaw get closed. So when we open our mouth, our jaw then get closed by the motor impulse. Both are the impulses, sensory and motor, comes through the trigeminal nerve. So this is a mixed nerve, acts as a sensory as well as a motor neuron. There are other reflexes also associated with the pons. The next is corneal blink reflex. Corneal blink reflex. What is that? If we rub our cornea, okay, our eye blinks. And when we rub our cornea, our sensory impulse actually comes by the trigeminal nerve, and the motor signal comes that you have to blink the eyes. So that comes through the facial nerves. So this is the corneal blink reflex. Next, there is a tensor tympani and stapedius reflex. What is this reflex? Here the tensor tympani and stapedius, these are the muscles in the middle ear, okay, that contract in response to loud sound. They contract when we heard any loud sound. They contract for protection, okay, they protect our inner ear. So whenever we heard loud sound, these two muscles, tensor tympani and stapedius, they contract to protect our inner ear. That is the tensor tympani stapedius reflex. So here the sensory information goes through the vestibulocochlear. Here, vestibulocochlear. The sensory impulse goes through this nerve, vestibulocochlear, and the motor impulse comes through the trigeminal. Motor impulse comes through the trigeminal. So this is the function of the pons. Now come to the medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata, here it is associated with the swallowing and gag reflex. Gag reflex. What is this reflex? The gag reflex is an involuntary reflex. Actually, we all know that medulla oblongata is associated with the involuntary functions. So here, the gag reflex is an involuntary reflex that protects our throat and pharynx. Our throat and pharynx from the foreign objects. The gag reflex is a normal body response, is a normal response of our body that prevents the choking and swallowing of something unpleasant. Okay, whatever is not pleasant, if we swallow that thing, so our gag reflex protect that. Our back part of the tongue get attached with the throat. By that way, they protect the foreign particles, any unpleasant thing to get entered into the gut. Okay, so this is the gag reflex. Here the glossopharyngeal, okay, the glossopharyngeal and vagus, these two nerves, by these two nerves sensory impulse come in to the medulla oblongata, and also by them the motor impulse come out of the medulla oblongata. Okay, so glossopharyngeal and vagus, these two are associated with the swallow and gag reflex. Next, there is the cough and sneeze reflex. Cough and sneeze reflex. They also help to clear our respiratory system if any foreign particles or irritant come inside. So this is the cough and sneeze reflex. Here in this part, sensory neuron form a group. Sensory neuron form a group. Here in this way they form a group that transmit the signals from the spinal cord to the brain, upper part, and this is called the DCML. DCML. What is the full form of DCML? I am writing it here. This is the dorsal column medial lemniscus. Okay, it's a pathway, a sensory pathway of the central nervous system. It's a sensory nerve, it's a sensory pathway. The sensory nerves group together to form this kind of pathway that is actually found in the medulla. So this is called the DCML, dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. And also another thing is important for the brain stem, that is the clusters of the neuron. We call them as a nuclei. We can find the nuclei at the medulla here, at the pons, and also at the midbrain. Midbrain, pons and medulla. They are called they form the reticular formation. They form a reticular formation, and they are actually associated with the consciousness, and control the biological rhythm, circadian rhythm. Okay, and this part, this reticular formation is associated with the consciousness. These are the nuclei. I have showing you here, that is the nuclei. What is nuclei? Nuclei is the group of the neuron. They form within the brainstem and they arrange like that. They form the reticular arrangement, reticular formation. So this is the nuclei present at the midbrain. This is associated with the consciousness. And these two nuclei, okay, these two nuclei are associated with the cardiovascular, basic functions of the cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular and respiratory. Cardiovascular and respiratory system. So these are all about the functions of the midbrain. Okay, pons, midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata. These three form the brainstem. These are the cranial nerves associated with the brainstem: optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus and hypogеал. Okay, now the function is that midbrain is associated with the vision, accommodation, pupillary light reflex, substantia nigra, okay, which is associated with the dopaminergic system. Due to the die of this nerve, someone may causes a possesses Parkinson's disease. Okay. Next, there is a pons. It is associated with jaw jerk reflex, corneal blink reflex, tensor tympani stapedius reflex, and there is a medulla oblongata. It is associated with swallowing, gag reflex, cough and sneeze reflex. Okay, and the sensory neuron form a group here that is called the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. Lemniscus pathway. Okay, and there are also in the brain stem you find three nuclei. They form the reticular formation. The nuclei present at the midbrain associated with the consciousness, and the nuclei present in pons and medulla, they are associated with the respiratory system, respiratory and cardiovascular, the normal functions of respiratory and cardiovascular. So these are all about the brain stem. Thank you for watching. We will meet on the next video with new topic. Till then, take care and stay tuned with my channel.